is probably here. Zoe, do you want to start the recording? Okay. Okay. So welcome everyone. Today we have Dr. Tepring Piquado with us. Dr. Piquado is a senior policy researcher at RAND Corporation and is also a professor at Pardee RAND Graduate School and a chief policy director at California Issues Forum. She also serves as the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity and Achievement Advisor for Pardee RAND students. At RAND, Dr. Piquado leads complex multi-site and multidisciplinary projects to provide evidence-based guidance to federal, state, and local decision makers. She has published across a wide range of topics, including traumatic brain injury, emerging technologies, human-machine systems, the use of DNA sequencing in familial searches, and military to civilian workforce transitions. At California Issues Forum, Dr. Piquado provides advisory guidance and analysis on active bills and major issues being considered by state legislators, including on recycling, zero emissions vehicles, economic recovery, homelessness, housing, banking, and public health. Dr. Piquado earned her PhD and MS in neuroscience from Brandeis University and BS in computer science from Georgetown. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Piquado.
Great, thank you guys for having me. I'm so glad, even if it's virtual, you know, it's better than skipping all of these talks throughout the year in COVID times. So again, thank you for having me and thank you for that lovely introduction. It always kind of surprised me that I have so many jobs. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and a few slides. We'll do that probably until about 10:30, and then I'll open it up for questions from you all because I want it to be a conversation rather than me sharing to you. Oh, it's disabled. Should I send my slides to you?
Sorry, I forgot to here. You should be fine now. Sorry about that.
Got it. Okay. Let's open it up. Okay, so you guys, I am accessible. You can find me with my email address, piquadot@georgetown.edu, or on Twitter, Dr. Tepring, LinkedIn, again, Tepring Piquado. But overall, I'm a neuroscientist, a professor, and a chief policy director, as was said in the bio. And so those are my three identities that I hold really close to me right now. And I'm going to share some additional things about me along the way. So I feel that, you know, I am in the place where I am right now because of my education. And, you know, it's a great equalizer. But so my background is actually, my dad was Italian, my mom was Black, and my husband's Filipino, and I come from a truly Californian family, mixed, blended. And throughout all of it, education has really been a force that's really important in my family. Both of my grandparents were in the Air Force and brought their families to Sacramento, where I grew up. And my on my Black side, my grandma actually worked her way through school to earn her PhD. So I am not the first in my family to go to college, to go to grad school. My grandma was a teacher, my dad was a teacher, and education has played a really important role in my life. But also experience. So as we are developing you know, policies, and you guys are in grad school, you're asking unasked questions. You have to learn the rules of the game, the process of grad school, the process of being at your first companies, and learning how to make small steps towards a larger goal. And then you have to gain the experience to be better than other people, to really advance your part of the world. Is you have to learn the game and then be better than everyone else to really make an impact. And so this is where I am glad that it's majority ladies. So one of the things that I've learned, and I have sort of a weird fascination with bees, they have a great mind collectively, and they make decisions very built on consensus. So when they're looking for their hive, they sort of swarm and they send out scout bees, and then they come back, they swarm, they do a little bee dance to tell about the characteristics of their new hive opportunities, and they heat up the room. Literally, the bees start flapping their wings and they heat it up, and the more heat generated means that hive new future home is something that they're attracted to. So the whole beehive ends up heating up, and that's their decision point. So they do this in order to protect their queen bees, grow their hive. And so one of the things that I learned was that queen bees are not born as royalty. They are born just like every other bee out there. But what the hive does is they collectively decide on a few of these bees to bathe them in royal jelly. So they basically don't give them the food that all the other bees give. They get this rich nutrient. It looks like milky substance. And it's just really, it's called royal jelly for real. And so queen bees aren't born that way. They become queen bees because of a selection process. So they're raised to become that royalty. And that's what I want you guys to understand, is that, you know, no one is born president of the United States or you know, professor of, you know, top-notch university. You're not born with PhDs. We're all born equal. And then we have these opportunities throughout our lives that generate this royal honey so that we become royalty. And so you guys is taking opportunities like listening to talks and participating in student government and finding ways to participate in your community that are your guys' royal jelly. So I really want to encourage you to take advantage of the opportunities that are at UCLA, you know, in LA area. And the picture that I'm showing you right there is that for the first two March for Sciences, this I think was the first one. You know, I was given the opportunity to speak at the March for Science, and it was just so rewarding and just, you know, instrumental in sort of the way that I think and participate in community activities. So take advantage of those opportunities as they come. Oops. Okay. So the three things that I want to share from this slide is that as you are developing and going through your grad program, there are three major components: clarity of thought, integrity of spirit, and excellence of performance. And so a lot of times we get sort of stuck, and that stuck is a lack of clarity. It's a lack of decision making, and indecision, not being able to make that decision on what your dissertation topic is going to be, or who your committee chairs are going to be, or what policy is the most important. You know, who your postdoc advisor is going to be, whether you're going to get a job or you're going to try to do a fellowship or a postdoc. All of that indecision is clouding your path. So I really encourage you guys to take the next couple of weeks and months to really seek clarity and create these goals. And I'm sure you've heard about the goals before: the SMART goals: specific, measurable, assignable, relevant, and time-based. So think about your goals, particularly as we're heading into a new year, and we're already a couple of weeks into the school year, to really gain clarity about what you want to do in your science as well as in your career focus. And so one of the things that I like, this quote is actually from Muhammad Ali, and he said, "What you're thinking is what you're becoming." So if you're thinking and you're doubting yourself and you're like, "I'm never going to get through this program, I'm never going to get a good job," like that's what's happening. And many of you guys know about epigenetics, right? And so it's this, all of our genes are set, right, when we're born, or DNA is what it is. But I think about the epigenetics as a framework of our genes are on or off. And what we're thinking in the last couple of months, particularly under the stress of and anxiety of COVID, but what we're thinking is what we're becoming. We are actively changing the on and off of that gene expression. So just remember that, you know, treat yourself with integrity and treat others with integrity, and respect and honesty and all that, because the way that you're feeling today, if it's sustained for a 3-month period, is what you're becoming, literally. I had this up on my desk. I still have it as a screen rotating picture. Do or do not, there is no try. Yoda, not baby Yoda, I found out from Mandalorian, but Yoda said this. I just really appreciate this, because oftentimes we doubt ourselves and we say like, oh, I'll try to do that. The honesty is we are going to do it, and it's just varying degrees of excellence. And so when you put something forth, remember you're doing it, or take it off the table, because that sort of the split or the indecision is actually detracting from your excellence. Okay, we need a network. Networking is so important. That's why on the first slide, I gave you my email, I gave you my Twitter. I'm accessible, I'm on LinkedIn. I'll transfer you guys to my email after LinkedIn. You need a network. Networking has gotten me every single position. I was discussing this yesterday, every single position that I've had since college. So even at RAND, I was at a fellowship meeting. A board member said, would you like me to introduce you to someone at RAND? I spoke to him a couple of times and I went through the process. You know, this is a networking opportunity as well for me. So I want to emphasize the network. For me, my network, you know, started with my dad, who passed away a long time ago, my brother that you see there, my husband is in the next picture, and that is one of our recommitment weddings with a large portion of our friends. So friends, family, coworkers, they're your network. If you want to go quickly, you can go alone, but if you want to go far, you do it together. Having a good attitude just makes everything better. Today is a good day for a good day, particularly in COVID times. You know, I'm an extreme extrovert. I liked interacting with all those strangers, you know, as we walked for March of Science. I like interacting with you guys today. It gives me energy at the end of the day to know I've participated in something like this, and just having a good attitude. I've also heard that if you just put on a smile until 10 o'clock, particularly for younger adults, then the rest of the day you'll be able to have the rest of the day a good day. So just try to have a good attitude, give yourself grace, particularly in these trying times, but also because you're in a graduate program and they are not easy. So make sure that, you know, as you're interacting with people, you'll be surprised that if you're having a positive attitude, you'll receive a positive attitude more often than not in return. So persistence is the only thing that gets you through a grad program. If you persist, keep on trying, ask for help, keep doing the work, learn more and more, it's a game of persistence. I don't really know what else to say about that. You know, you guys are in top-notch program, and just, you know that with your experiments, you're trying, you tweak something, that's the scientific method, and that's for throughout life. Okay, there are struggles. There are societal struggles, there are personal struggles, there are professional struggles. Without struggle, there is no progress. That was said by Frederick Douglass. So particularly in grad school, I think is when I started emphasizing mind, body, and soul, things that incorporate me and my health and well-being, not just my mind, as I was getting my PhD in neuroscience, a discipline that I did not have a background in. I hadn't taken biology since 9th grade, and I actually went to grad school 4 years after college. I went through college as a computer scientist and a math person, and I did not do computational neuroscience. I did more biological neuroscience. So while my mind was getting strengthened, and I love the bee imagery, I also thought it was important to nourish my body and my soul. And my body is, when I was finishing up my dissertation in the last 6 months of my program, I, oddly enough, not being a runner, decided to train for a marathon. This picture is when I did 10 half marathons in 1 year, but in my PhD year, last year before my PhD, I did my first marathon. And so that was something that I felt was really important to also strengthen my body as I was getting my PhD in my mind. And then the soul aspect, I have imagery onto the Daffy and Bugs as Captain America and Iron Man for a couple of reasons. One, I watch a lot of movies. It's something that is really good for my soul. I get a lot of my information, at least sparks my curiosity because of movies. But also I really like the two juxtaposition of Iron Man, who is a man of great wealth, who has gadgets that makes him strong, and he tries to improve society through the gadgets. I feel like I'm much more of that. And then the other imagery is like the friendship between Daffy and Bugs, and my husband and I feel like have this sort of relationship too. He's much more Captain America, sort of like honor and fighting for the righteousness. So the soul aspect, doesn't have to be religious, although it can be for many folks. And it's just something to center yourself. So a lot of times, I suffer from a lot of frustration. I don't understand why the world is doing this. I don't understand. It's not fair. It's not right. People are making, in my opinion, the wrong decisions. And so for me, while calm seas don't make for a good sailor, I do things outside that center me so that in my day-to-day life, I can be much more calm and much more centered. And I feel like that's good for my soul. So whether it's yoga, eating probiotics in the morning, drinking tea, whatever it is for you, find something that's good for your soul. And that's sort of like the triad of mind, body, and soul that's important for your everyday living. And to finish up, there's no finish line. So, this is my life. I am a scientist. That's my identity. That's the first thing I lead with. I'm a scientist. I'm a neuroscientist. I happen to work right now at RAND and PGRS, which is RAND's graduate school, Pardee RAND graduate school. And I love my research and my students for the next generation of leaders. I also work at California Issues Forum. So actually at RAND, my portfolio is mostly this year, this coming up year, supporting wounded warriors with thinking about how to improve services for those who've gotten a traumatic brain injury, and particularly along their lifespan. I also have a project looking at blast injury and computational modeling of the human response to blast injury. And I just finished up a couple of brain health reports that should be coming out in the next couple of months. I teach a policy and action course, so looking at how our research can inform policies, particularly going through the California State Legislature. And I teach ethics in the spring this year, usually in the fall, but because of COVID, we were trying to teach in person. So I also work, I wear a lot of hats. I also work at the California Issues Forum. California Issues Forum is an organization that works directly with elected officials and their staff to improve the lives of Californians. So I actually ran for public office in 2018, at the beginning of 2018, in a special that would have represented UCLA and Culver and Crenshaw areas. And so I got in second place there. And it just happened to be the special that our paperwork had to go in, so it also had to be in for the midterms. So I lost the special, Assembly Member Comlogger won, and I stopped campaigning, went back to RAND and started doing more research. But I did so well that in the primaries of that year, I got in second place. And if you are familiar with California politics, we have a top 2 race. So among the 5 of us that were up for election, Ms. Comlogger and I got in the top 2. So that put me on the ballot in the general midterms. And I also got second place with 38%. So I was doing incrementally better, even though I wasn't actively running for office. And with that, I ended up being offered the California Issues Forum position, where I get to look at policies, look at bills, sort of craft them out. The top 2 that I'm working on right now is ZEV, zero emission vehicles, the EV emission or the EV vehicles, and sort of what are some opportunities to improve the uptake of that, and what are some concerns that we need to place particular emphasis on, particularly in access and affordability and equity issues across California. And then the other big issue area that I'm working on, at least this month, is on recycling issues, right? Infrastructure, the type of recycling, and the cost and affordability of that. But that is not actually where I stop. So I also do, I was educated at Georgetown, and were trained and thought Jesuit education, men and women in service to others. So that was where I got my foundational learning. And so service is still a really important part of my life. And that's not just the cash, the treasure, but it's also time and talent. So the way that I think about those as a triad is time is something that you give up your time that is very valuable, and particularly now when we can see very few people. But that's something like a beach cleanup, right? And so you give your time, or packing food at the LA Food Bank. Or you guys have like a Bruins homeless, not shelter, but like facility, like, might be volunteering for that. So that's the time. But talent is something like this, where I have a background in neuroscience and policy, and a researcher and an educator. And so I'm doing something that I have a little bit of background talent for. I've written grants because, we're learning how to write grants, and I wrote a grant for a foundation. So that's something that's more specifically tailored to my background and my talent. And then there's treasure, and all 3 of them are really important. So sometimes I just give my cash because I don't know anything about that, and I don't want to give my time. So thinking about that as you guys move forward, particularly those of us that are in privileged backgrounds right now, there's always an opportunity to give back to someone less privileged. So time, talent, and treasure. So I'm on the board of UC Irvine's Graduate Dean's Advisory Council. And so that's where I give some of my time, talent, and treasure. I am Georgetown's chair of the alumni admissions program, where we interview all incoming applicants. And I set up the network of alumni to prospective students. And then I'm on the board of Sacramento Country Day School, where I went to high school, but now I give back in service to the school. And I think you guys heard what I was talking about, like an anonymous letter, because we did just, COVID time is really struggling. So we often encounter frustrated individuals, students, parents, faculty, and staff. And so it's been a real pleasure to give back in a different way, other than just my time to Country Day School. So that is about me in a nutshell. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can have a conversation. Oh, 10:30 on the dot. Yay. Okay, you guys. I want to open it up for questions. We can talk about, grad school, career progression, how I got to my time, like where I am now, what I do to reduce stress, what I do to interview, tips and tricks. I don't know. What's on your mind?
I can ask a question.
Sure.
So you have so many hats that you wear, as you say, and I'm really curious about when in your career you began to get interested in science-related outreach, and kind of how you sought out support and resources, and what kinds of resources and support you actually did find for that interest. Like, was it in grad school or in undergrad that you started to be interested in this outreach stuff that you do so much of today?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that there was definitely a spark in graduate school, but it was probably, I'll tell you the other spark, or maybe an initial spark. So in grad school, I went on a recruiting event as a graduate student to this organization, this conference run by this group called SACNAS, Society to Advance Native Americans, Society to Advance Chicanos, Latinos, and Native Americans in Science. And there, it was just so fascinating. And I was sitting at my booth and telling everyone about Brandeis, and there was a gentleman that came by, and he had a black label, and I was just like, oh, what's that one? He's like, oh, I'm on the board. And I was like, I want to be on the board. And he's like, well, we're having elections, and we can have a student member. And I was just like, I'm totally going to run for this board. And so I did run for it just like a month later, and I was selected. And so that was my first service opportunity to really, of which I'm not in that racial demographic at all, but I really valued what this organization was doing to increase representation, particularly among those racial minority groups. And I thought it was just such a fabulous opportunity on a national scale to increase representation among the people of color. And so that was probably where I first started my drive toward public policy, and how our local and our state and our federal laws are actually not aligned for advancement across all groups equitably. And so while my PhD was in neurobiology of language, I was in this two-path parallel track. And so as I participated and engaged in more conferences and more board meetings from that, when I went on to my postdoc, I kept that network. And I kept feeling this press to participate and improve the lives of others. And so I had always had this tension of, I love doing, my version of the bench research and looking at, the fMRIs of the brain parts, and seeing what's important for speech communication. But in about my second year in my postdoc, I applied for this fellowship called CCST, California Council on Science and Technology, where I was afforded the opportunity to be placed in the legislature in California for a year and kind of learn the nuts and bolts about how a bill becomes a law, and also how us externally as scientists can influence the process, and how valuable it is for our background, perspective, experiences, and training to inform that process. And so, I highlight that, I encourage that, and I think it's so valuable to have that type of the constituency participating in our legislative process. And I have some ideas for you guys as a group, as individuals, and maybe you can send around the link afterwards or something. But if you go right now, yesterday started the first day of the new 2-year session. All the assembly members and senators were sworn in, and they started their work. So there are about 150 bills that were put across, and you can go to leginfo.ca.gov. I think it might be leginfo.legislature.ca.gov, but leg, L-E-G, it's like leg, but pronounced leginfo.ca.gov. And you can start to look at the bills that elected officials are really working on right now. And if you have a background interest in wildfires or police officer safety, where you have to be 25 or have a college degree before you can be a police officer, or tenant relief, the Tenant Relief Act, AB 15 by David Chu, Assemblymember David Chu. You can look at that and you can participate. You can write a letter and you can call their office and you can engage. So I just really encourage you to engage. The other part that kind of sparked my mind is I was a teacher right after college, and I was also assigned to an elective, community service elective, right? And it's like, no one likes community service. So I was stuck with it because I was the junior faculty member, but I ended up loving community service. And so we did a variety of things, including a blood bank, which had never been done before on campus. And in that, we were nominated for the unsung hero, like the students were. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So we got to go to this luncheon, and it was filled with people across Sacramento that had done such extraordinary efforts to really do things locally. And I was like, this is policy making, because they're implementing things. They don't need a law. They don't need a legislature. They're just doing things. And I thought that was so awesome, that it kept me focused on being of service to others in the future. That didn't answer your question about resources though. What resources do I do? I mean, you guys have so many more advantages because, one, you have LinkedIn, two, you have all these groups now, right? So you have the UC network. So I would connect with UC Riverside and UC Irvine, and USC that I know are in your community that are doing science policy type of work. I might, my fourth job is I actually have a company, the TMP group, and I might put on some tutorials on like memo writing and science policy engagement, science policy communication, because I think that there is a real need and desire to learn that more effectively.
And I'm just going to jump in also with a plug for the science policy group at UCLA. If you guys aren't members, we write policy memos that have been published, and we do lots of the things. And actually right after this talk today at 11 a.m., right? Sorry, I'm on the East Coast right now. At 11 a.m., we're having the program director of the CCST Science Fellows, which we just heard about, come to talk about the program with an alumni of the program. So you could hear from two people who went through the program in one day, and learn all about that too. So
good. Yay. Yeah, great. Other questions?
Sorry. Yes, I know you mentioned some of the main projects that you're working on at RAND. And if you're comfortable or if you're allowed, could you tell us more about the research that you do at RAND?
Yeah, sure. So right now my projects are not confidential or secret or anything. So my main project, I just won an award from the Wounded Warrior Project. And so what we're going to be doing is taking a deep dive. We're going to be doing a couple of things. One is we're going to do an old-fashioned literature review. That's our tried and true. We look at what's the state of treatment for people with traumatic brain injury. And we're going to be looking at services. So these members have, VA hospitals in their area. We're going to be mapping the hospitals, the services that are outside of the hospitals from, city centers, and seeing where optimal services are being performed. So we're looking at whether there's an access problem. We're going to create a registry because we want people in the future to be able to know where those service providers are and have a higher level of one, integration with their VA hospital or their doctor's office, and two, be able to be a little bit more mobile. So if they do move into a new area, they can have a higher level of accessibility. And it also, three, helps the Wounded Warrior Project, which partners with service providers to improve care, to coordinate care. So we're going to look at the registries. We're then going to be talking to the wounded warriors themselves and their caregivers to find out what's working, what's not working, what are their real needs, both in their physical health, but also their mental health and well-being, including their relationships. So we're going to be talking to them, kind of getting that qualitative assessment of how they're doing, particularly as they age. Those with traumatic brain injury tend to have an accelerated lifespan. So we're looking at the types of opportunities to sort of extend the quality of life through, sleep treatments, nutrition treatments, pain management treatments, things like that. And then we're going to wrap that all up in a beautifully packaged presentation that will likely have a little bit of an animated portion to it as well. That's accessible for everyone, and then a nice shiny presentation to the board as well in about 6 months. So that's that project. The other project is sponsored by BIRCA, Blast Injury Research Coordinating Office. And that is looking at what it's just a state of the state. So it's a big deep dive literature review, but also gap analysis. So what we're really looking for is not just what's happening in the computational modeling world on modeling the human response to blast, but we're also trying to look for gaps. So right now, there's tons of modeling of the brain and the pia, the dura, the blood vessels, the individual anatomy, the different densities between a male and a female skull, things like that. But there may be less or non-existent measurements of what happens when the blast affects not just subthresholds of traumatic brain injury or even concussion, but what happens to the lungs or the liver or the tissue or the gut. So we're looking at that. It's called multi-scale, from cellular to whole body. So those are my two projects that I lead right now. And RAND, you lead some projects, but you also work on other people's projects too that have interest. So I'm looking at one that's looking at the details of job characteristics of those that are serving in the military and translating it to civilian jobs. So instead of infantrymen being, kind of ushered into a police officer, that's not particularly the perfect match. They're actually the most, analytically defined, matched with firefighters. And so we're doing that for a variety of occupations across the service branches. So, yeah.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that sounds really impactful. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
I have a question. Is there anything that you've kind of realized along your path about the most effective way to communicate either your research or just how important your research is to either non-scientists or kind of just normal humans or policymakers, like any of the category of non-scientists?
Right.
Or things that we're taught that don't actually work well,
I'm questioning whether our journal process is the most effective. I think that it's less the forms in which we communicate. It's less whether it's written or it's verbal or if it's an op-ed or if it's on Twitter versus, a journal, things like that. I think what's important is being comprehensive. So it's not enough just to publish an article and hope that someone's going to pick it up. There's this extra portion that I don't think I did / appreciated, and I don't think that globally in academia we appreciate as much. So I would say I'm going to give accolades to PPIC, Public Policy Institute of California. They generate, good research with likely highly trained and talented research, but then they market it. And I think marketing is the appropriate term. They put it in the locations, they make the announcement in the locations that people that have the decision-making powers actually see. And then they give verbal briefings to the decision makers as well. And they don't just stop at publishing their paper, putting it in a journal or putting it online. They actually do the legwork to be like, hey guys, this is important and this is why. So I would say the comprehensive outreach plan or the marketing plan is important, and it's important to do before. So like I just got awarded, it's actually in contracts right now, it's with the legal team for the Wounded Warrior Project, but I'm already thinking about that marketing component. So it's important for the Wounded Warrior himself, mostly himself, but themselves, males and females. But how do I get it to them? So maybe we should go to the clinics and give these briefings. Maybe we should have this little visual that we put up on YouTube and we send into like their community groups. So I'm already thinking about what my end product, I don't even know what it's gonna say yet, but where it's gonna go. And the other portion about that is, I think that we need to build relationships that aren't transactional. So we are going to have research that we want in the hands of decision makers. They're going to want something from us that we don't know either. And so instead of like waiting until you're at my level and you're firmly like tenured, or I'm senior at RAND and like I can just kind of keep on chugging away until I retire, I would prefer that you all start building your relationships and finding, what organization that's really well matched towards, if you're particularly interested in like health or hospitals, or I don't know, you could switch to housing or environmental things. Building those relationships for nothing other than you're interested and how can I serve? How can I help? Because that will serve you into the future. You'll start to get questions of, even if you're referring someone, right? So like, as you're building these relationships, you're going to these, town halls of your elected officials or local officials, or, representatives from nonprofits that you are really liking, you might be of help now. And then when you need help later, it's not a transaction. So developing relationships earlier, that's for the specific reason is to develop the relationship, because you never know where it can go.
That's so interesting. Thank you so much. It's also funny because for the, I've written a couple policy memos with the science policy group, and we use PPIC briefs, or I don't know what you call them, like reports all the time, because they're so easy to find. They're so easy to read. They have such great graphics and images, and they're so good.
RAND is so much better, but
no, we use a lot of
RAND.
We use a lot of RAND.
No. RAND is not great on marketing itself to the legislature. PPIC, I think that they get the gold star. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm so happy that this topic came up, honestly, because I'm a neurograd student, so I haven't published my first paper in lab yet. And I've been wondering how I can like publish the paper and then make sure it actually is used in the future. And I think now I want to have that conversation with my PI about how we can, like, as you say, market the results in such a way that they become useful. So I think that might be a useful conversation for everyone to have with their PI.
Yeah, and even at your grad level, what it may mean is going to your undergrad and giving that talk at your undergrad institution, right? And that's a way for you to start to disseminate it. It also is really good for building your own portfolio of like speaking engagements and putting that on your CV. And one of the things is that this Zoom interaction, this is so easy. It's inexpensive, it's flexible. I don't have to drive anywhere. I didn't have to take 4 hours out of my day. You know, so I would say take advantage of now our new Zoom world. And even I suspect that even when we get out of COVID, and I'm pessimistic in like 2022, that we will have a hybrid. We'll have Zooms and we'll have in-persons. The in-persons will obviously be like well paid, well attended and everything, but the Zooms will still persist. Yeah. What else, you guys? Do you want to turn it off for the last 9 minutes and we can ask any personal questions that we have? So
Yes,
thank you
I'm
so
now
much.
going to stop the recording. Thank you so much. And now we can go to secret questions. Hold on one second. Okay.